We move now from my interviews with Trump supporters at his Pickens, South Carolina rally to Trump's speech at that same rally, as always, detached from reality and now very much so specifically on the subject of his federal indictment. I was going to say misunderstands, but pretends to misunderstand, I think is the more accurate way to put it, the criminal charges against him to mislead his followers so that they're perfectly fine with him not being held accountable for what now seem to be some pretty obvious violations of the law, especially with what is called the Trump tape, him being caught on tape committing crimes. But in the wake of that, at this rally, he continues to spew nonsense, as is expected, starting with this.
They go after me for the Presidential Records Act. Well, that's what they should be looking at, because everything I did was under the Presidential Records Act. We have a thug prosecutor named Smith, Jack Smith. He's a thug. He's had many losses. He's destroyed many lives, and they put him in charge. In the meantime, what about Biden's records? This guy has 1,850 boxes. He has boxes stored in Chinatown in D.C., rough place, by the way.
So the records that he's referring to that Biden still has ownership over or still has in his possession, he is allowed to. They aren't classified. At least there's not evidence to them being classified, whereas Trump's very different story. But mislead, try to muddy the waters as much as possible. And then his followers, they're already ready to buy into it. So just give us something and we'll go along with it, is definitely the sentiment. And interestingly, as we just went over in the last segment, if you're a YouTube segment viewer and you haven't seen my coverage of the interviews I did at this same rally, definitely go check it out on the YouTube channel. But it was fascinating to see all of the different talking points, some that contradict, just completely detached from any facts, and it doesn't matter. This argument from one Trump supporter, like I said, can contradict arguments from other Trump supporters. They can be going off of different conspiracy theories. They can be accepting different versions of the facts. But at some point, once they're at this rally, they're all united around the fact that Trump can do no wrong and Trump shouldn't be held accountable, no matter the specific talking point they buy into, because Trump has even contradicted himself with his own defense publicly against these charges. Here's more of this nonsense.
Charging a former president of the United States under the Espionage Act of 1917. Espionage. As Putin said, you are the most vicious president ever. There's never been a president that did this to me, and yet I got along with him. Isn't it that?
What? What did that have to do with anything? Yes, you're being charged for violating the Espionage Act. And that, what has to do with Putin? How? Who knows? Then there's this.
Big. The Espionage Act has been used to go after traitors and spies. It has nothing to do with a former president legally keeping documents. As a president, the law that applies to this case is not the Espionage Act, this vicious, never used before, it's only been used on me over boxes that I'm allowed to have, the Espionage Act. But the Presidential Records Act, which is not even mentioned in this horrible and vicious...
Okay, so you get it on that one. The reason that's not mentioned is because you're not being charged under the Presidential Records Act. You are being charged, as other people have, even though Trump said otherwise, under the Espionage Act. And yes, it's been used to prosecute people for their actions in regard to classified sensitive national defense information. And that's the case in Trump's case here as well. Then we move from his legal troubles to the subject of woke.
For women. And you know the amazing thing, because of our crazy woke society, and I hate the word woke actually, because nobody even has a real accurate description. It means lack of common sense more than anything else. But because for women.
Yeah, because Trump kind of does this free, just say whatever on stage type thing where he kind of responds to what he's saying in the moment. You get moments like that, and we've seen in the past him say similar things about the word woke, where he is recognizing how absurd the talking point is a little bit of his own movement. And there he said it less explicitly, but in the past he said, gosh, people on the right, something to this effect, constantly say woke, 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 but don't even know what it means. We can't even provide a definition. And that's exactly right. And it's because it's not attached to any actual set of ideological differences. It's just, I don't like that, and that can be anything. And so then you can apply that word woke to it. And it's a nice way to very lazily attack the other side, even though wokeness had a meaning, still does to some people, that meant something, being aware of social injustices and wanting to address them, and the societal inequality and all of that, having an awareness about that. Now it just means mostly, especially on the right wing, icky leftists. I don't know. Who knows? And then you have this on a different case in regard to the election. This is the Georgia Fulton County District Attorney case.
Copy of it. It was a perfect call. These were perfect calls. These were calls where you're questioning the validity and the safety of elections. And it's a disgrace that they're allowed to even think about it. But not one person protested until long after that call. And if there was something wrong with that call, I am not a stupid person. Number one, I'm an honest person, so I wouldn't do it anyway. But when people are on the phone, including many lawyers, do you think many people were on that phone? Many, many people. Do you think I'm going to say what they'd like to have? But the problem is, it's not borne out. I will tell you what is borne out. The call was supposedly taped in the state of Florida. And in Florida, you're not allowed to do, that's a two-party state. In other words, you're not allowed to tape phone calls. They taped the phone call to show you how nice they are. They taped the phone call, and you're not allowed. So that is the real crime here. They had a two-party state.
Sure. That's the real crime. Of course, he's referring to the Brad Raffensperger find me 11,780 votes phone call, where he's obviously blatantly and possibly criminally pressuring an election official to find votes that don't exist. So unlawfully, unconstitutionally overthrow an election. That was a part of the larger scheme to do just that on the part of Trump, as we've talked about extensively. And I really do think, in part because of that call and the surrounding actions from Trump and his allies, that the Georgia Fulton County DA case is so strong against Trump, and hopefully he will indeed be indicted there too, held accountable legally there too, because of the importance of not allowing someone such as Trump to go through without being held accountable a process of attempting to use his office to subvert the will of the people as president of the United States, to install himself president despite losing that election. That can't be something that he's not held accountable for. He must be held accountable for those actions, both for his sake and for the sake of the future of the country.